Louisiana versus all y'all. Jarrett Roser here with Dejanay Green. An LSU and Florida State graduate in terms of the college level. Went to Florida State for her master's after going to college for a few years there, undergraduate with a few of us, including Tyler Batiste and Amos Morale, who have been on the YouTube channel before. Got your master's and came back to bring some of that sports psychology knowledge to the young athletes of Louisiana. We talk a little bit about the mental playbook, and now you're over at UNO too as coordinator of student athlete enrichment and a mental training specialist. Dej, I'm going to be as professional as you've ever seen me through this chat.
Oh.
So don't be
I'm glad
alarmed.
this is being recorded then.
Yeah. Transitioning from the playing on your phone part of the evening to the professional interview portion. But thanks for taking a few minutes to talk about some of this with me. How you doing?
I mean, every day above ground is a good one. So it's good. It's good. Making it through.
Yeah, we talk so much about sort of the mental health and wellness side of sports that obviously, you've made a career out of working with these young athletes, and that side that gets so overlooked, I think, by a lot of people, and certainly from the outside. A lot of fans and media kind of lose sight of that component, and right now is such a challenging time for all of us across the board, dealing with everything that we're dealing with. Not just in sports, but in the country as a whole, and how crazy 2020 has been. And with these young athletes right now, there's so much up in the air that continues to bear a huge weight for them. I don't know how you want to kind of dive into some of this, but you've worked a lot with high school athletes in Southeast Louisiana, a lot with college athletes in Southeast Louisiana. And so you know very well that this is a really difficult time for these young men and women.
Yeah, let's dive in head first. That's how we could do it. Just recognizing that first we're living through a pandemic. Was that real on anybody's agenda? January 2020, it wasn't. So it's just like, first of all, acknowledging that we're trying to be normal in a not normal situation, right? We're all looking for, a normal schedule or a normal experience or a normal, day, and trying to find normal in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of a, social justice movement, in the middle of what are we going to do? It's like that normal. A lot of us are chasing, we might not be able to get it as easily as we did before. And then, that's kind of exacerbated in athletics because we're so used to a schedule and used to knowing what time we're doing this and who's going to be there, who all going to be there. We know who's going to be there, your teammates, your coaches, your staff. Like, we know who's going to be there. We know that everybody's on the same page, right? But now it's just like, we don't know if everybody's coming back. We don't know who's going to, decide to stay with their family because of COVID. We don't know who can't come back because of COVID. It's just things like that. So we just have a lot of moving pieces that we're trying to put together and make it seem as normal as possible. And that's just something that takes, it takes a lot, just like each day, just trying to, get up, have a schedule. And you're like, well, I know at this time we're supposed to be doing 2-a-days. We're supposed to be doing this. We're supposed to be doing that. My coach is supposed to be blowing up my phone talking about, why didn't you pick up the last water bottles? But we're not, we don't have that. And so just, first of all, acknowledging that we are in a different space than we were August 2019. And I think trying to kind of force that normalcy that we're used to is kind of putting a lot of stress on people, from athletes to coaches, administrators, support staff, parents, friends, grandma, everybody, so it's just kind of like, well, what do you do? If it's like, if I can't be normal like August 2019, well, then what do I do now? And I think that's a question a lot of people are grappling with right now.
We consider we kind of joke about when people get older, they get more set in their ways, and whether you want to consider that us or people a little bit older than us getting a
It's
little bit more.
us. I mean, we up there, man. We up there.
Um, and you look at, I think, a kind of typically you look at the younger folks as being more adaptable and flexible and resilient in a way. We talk about that a lot through tragedy and things, that kids can be a lot more resilient than you necessarily give them credit for a lot of times. But that structure component and them being used to those routines, particularly for athletes who have so many I guess balls in the air and carry such a juggling act between the student side and the athlete side, and get really used
Hmm.
to and rely upon that structure, and knowing that as stretched thin as they can be, that there is sort of that routine that they can rely on. How difficult is that for them, even at a young and theoretically flexible age, to have that pulled out, and how can that affect them as they try to just go about, whether it be preparation for their sport or just kind of living their day-to-day life and managing their relationships and kind of mental wellness.
I mean, it's straight up wild magnolia. I mean, even like young children, like, 3 and 4 year olds, like they may not have the words to express that they're stressed, that they're not with their friends, and they may end up throwing tantrums or crying over like very minimal things to adults, but to a kid, they're just like, this is not what I understand. So kids as little as this high, all the way up, to college and beyond, like we're feeling it, and the way that it's being expressed is just different. But when you talk about schedules and routines, like we go from having a set class schedule, your classes are going to be between, let's say in college, between 9 and 1, practices from 1 to 5, study hall is from 5 to 8. Now you have to learn online. But what if you don't have internet access? What if you need to be in class and you need to raise your hand and ask questions? You're that person who's asking 100 questions in class, and everybody's like, "Oh, there they go again." But that's how you learn best. And now you have to do everything online. Classes are online. You see your family online. You see everything online. You're having team meetings online. We're doing this interview online. So that's something that we were forced into. It's just like school was going March, 11th. Come March 15th, everything was basically, the rug was pulled out from a lot of us. And now you had to go from being in class, having your academic support with your teachers, your friends, people that you studied with, things like that. The librarian that came through in the clutch, she's not there anymore. He's not there anymore. So it's just like now you're being forced to learn everything online. Well, that's not how you learn best, but you're being told deal with it because that's how you're going to learn. And that was something that we had to quickly adjust to. And some of us didn't like it. Some of us still don't like it. Like, I'm officially zoomed out. But since you're my friend, I'm here. But other than that, I'm officially zoomed out. But ways to kind of adjust to and manage that is to kind of figure out, this is the hand I'm dealt with. How can I go ahead and play my cards best? If online learning is not your thing, then maybe, being able to, or if you get distracted easily and you can't sit in front of a computer for, 3, 4 hours at a time, make a schedule. All right. Kind of get yourself back on that class schedule to where, you have 50 minutes, Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes, 50 minutes, like for college athletes. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you work on one subject from 11 to 11:50. You work on another subject from 12 to 12:50, and you treat it like school. Is it exactly like the school that we knew in 2019? No, but this is the school that we have now. And then also giving yourself screen breaks. Like, I know everything is online, everything is social media, your classes are online, but also just kind of remembering, like, hey, like, they have stuff outside that I can do, or I can, pick up a new hobby. I picked up coloring. Like, I haven't colored anything since I think like 5th grade maybe. And I have like a coloring book right there with like crayons and junk. And so it's just like, because I was overloaded with the onlineness of it all. So just took a step back and I colored, and I'm actually getting pretty good at it. So it's just like, kind of taking the pieces that are in front of you. And I know, they always say, younger people are better at adapting and adjusting. Yeah, but at the same time, it still sucks. It still sucks to have to adjust. So it's just like, yeah, you might be able to do it better than, an 85-year-old, but it's the process. And it still sucks because it's not what you're used to, but now it's what you got to do. So yeah, I would say
Yeah.
treat school like, get back on like a school schedule, but then also get back to figuring out who you are and kind of finding like the new pieces of yourself to include in that new normal.
I appreciate you kind of sharing some of the, I guess, that advice for some of this, because I was going to get into some of those potential tips of how to manage this better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the getting away from the digitalness at times and getting back to a little bit more real life is big. And you mentioned being zoomed out. I appreciate you agreeing to hop on with me. But what I didn't think I was going to be
I
asking you to
don't think I had
follow
a
up,
choice.
I didn't think I was going to be asking you follow-ups about coloring. I would hope you're a pretty talented colorer at this point.
Oh, it's right here. I'm gonna share.
And as much as I said I was going to be as professional as possible, you have me like wanting to make Billy Madison drawing a blue duck jokes and stuff. Nice. So
I know. It's nice.
that so that
Coloring by me.
that was a little bit of an outlet, a de-stress, just kind of taking a break from the Zooms and unwinding a little bit.
Yeah. It was like picking up coloring. I realized that because what I do, like I keep coloring books with me because like in my office, because sometimes that's how people kind of spend time with themselves. They're like, I just want to color. And they just literally come through and color. And sometimes they take the coloring books and don't bring them back. And I just go, bring back my coloring books. But when I realized that was a way that other people were de-stressing during the season, it's just like if everything was too much, they'd be like, hey, let me cop one of those coloring books. And, they'll just color. And I was like, well, maybe I should do that because I felt like I was always on, especially working from home. That was something that was new to me because I definitely made it a point to leave work at work and then I would be home. But now work and home are the same. So I was like, how do I take a break? Like, what do I do? I can't go home from working at home. So I definitely, picked up color and I realized that I'm not really good at focusing as well as I thought. Because while I was coloring, I was like, well, I could send this email. I need to plan this for, later on today. I need to do that. And I'm like, nope, focus on coloring. Make sure you pick the right color scheme. Make sure you stay inside the lines, all that kind of stuff. So coloring definitely reminded me to be present, mindfulness, things like that.
Yeah, this isn't email time. This is coloring time. You got to keep that effectively compartmentalized. And I imagine some of that, I mean, we talk about work-life balance and you say leaving work at work sort of thing. Obviously, for students, there's a component of homework and it does kind of, their work bleeds into home a little bit. But probably now more so than ever when they're taking classes from where they're used to being maybe more of an unwind spot or a relaxation spot, or it's probably really kind of blurred some of those lines and brought some additional stresses into some areas just physically that they would like to be a little bit more recreational.
For sure. For sure. 'Cause I mean, think about it. Actually, I mean, like in high school, it's like being at school, that was your time. Like that was your time to shine. Like you get to be who you are, or, hopefully you get to be who you are. While you're at school, you have your squad, you have, people that you like, people, things like that. Home situations may not always be like that. And now people have been home and maybe not the best situations. And that adds to that stress to where school was that outlet and now you don't have that anymore. So now it's like you have to create your outlet. And that's something, at the high school level, it's kind of like that's where you're at school and you're at home. But then at college, or in college, if you're staying on campus, it does kind of mix together a little bit because your dorm is on campus. But at the same time, like you can go to the study hall, get your work done, clown around, get everything, get your hours in for study hall, then you go back home. Well, now sometimes study hall was closed. So now you got to do all that at home. And what if you have 4 or 3 roommates who are also trying to get everything done at home? And, usually if you if y'all schedules to where it's like, oh, I'm the only one here during the day, so I can kind of chill out before my roommates get home. Now all y'all there and all y'all get on everybody's nerves. So now it's just like a big, how do I find my space when everything's in my space? My homework is in my space. My team meetings are now in my space. Um, Teachers are now in my space. So it's just kind of like, how do I make this my space again? And that's something I think a lot of us are going to kind of, kind of wrestle with, especially this fall semester, having, classes online and roommates and trying to find some peace and trying to find some clarity. It's a lot. It's definitely a lot.
How can some of those socialization impacts, I guess, or socialization dynamics of whether you're just getting far too accustomed to all of your interaction being through Zoom or through these digital means, or you're that much more quarantined on top of one another and have less outlets to potentially get away, or any of kind of the aspects of what we have going on right now from a socialization standpoint impact these young folks. That's something I've thought about, certainly with
Mhm.
high school age kids. And you mentioned at one point the younger kids, and I think that's going to be very interesting to watch how it affects their development long term. But when you're looking specifically high school or even
Mhm.
college age, what kind of impacts can you see from this with them, and just kind of how it affects them?
It's levels to this, because it's just like on the first part, it's just like you're used to everything happening immediately, right? Your Zoom starts at 6, class starts at 6. Everything's happening for you immediately on the computer. But when we go back to more of a interaction, we're able to socially do things, it's not going to be as immediate. You're going to have to wait in line, to get what you need. You're going to have to, you know, be able to express yourself and not have Twitter fingers. Like, people can shoot things off in, Zoom chats and on social media, and Twitter fingers and be like, well, this is what I think. But when we get back in, face-to-face interactions, you can't just pop off at the mouth and, be protected by a keyboard. So I think that's something that people are also going to have to remember. A lot of people get real bold at keyboard, and it's just kind of like, when we get back to that face-to-face interaction, are you still going to be that bold? And so it's kind of thinking before you speak, I would say, once we get back to things. But then also, once we kind of get away from the digital everything and kind of get back to person interactions, we're going to have to be mindful of our body language. We're going to have to be mindful of, because you could easily turn the camera off and do your own thing while you're in a Zoom. But at the same time, when you're sitting in front of somebody, like, you got to look like you're engaged. You got to look like you're interested. And it's just kind of like, we have so many outs, I think, in a digital world, to where we can still seem present, but we're not. So where once we get back to that social interaction, to that, social gathering mode, I guess we were in before, we gotta remember that. Like, people are gonna see you and you look disinterested. Now people are like, oh, what's wrong with you? And it's like, oh, I just haven't been listening because I was zoomed out, literally. And so that's one thing, just making sure that we remember to engage with people once we see people in real life, since we're so easily able to disengage, I guess, online. And then just, to see friends, and, we're back in groups, like, the conversation is going to be different. It's not going to be, daps, hugs, and, all this good stuff. People are going to be like, oh, whoa, elbows, or hey, air high five, or just don't touch me, and it's just like, that conversation is going to be different. And you're going to have to respect some new boundaries with people, because some people, are taking it seriously, and they don't, they're going to enforce that distance. They're going to wear their mask and, things like that. So you definitely have that layer to it, to where it's like respecting people's boundaries. I don't have to wear a mask while I'm talking to you right now because we're what, 60 miles away. But in person, hey, do you want me to wear a mask or are you good? Like having that conversation with people is going to be part of that interaction now. Is that what you're
And
asking?
yeah, I mean, but
Okay.
that's yeah, that's definitely part of it. It's going to be a huge shift for a lot of people from spending half this year and potentially, depending on what their dynamics are heading into the fall at their respective schools, more
Mhm.
just away from people far more than they're used to, and now trying to adjust and transition back to something a little bit more normal, and how that might look. And
Mhm.
you mentioned sort of the advice to structure things in a way that can kind of build that routine for you, to find those outlets like coloring or whatever works for an individual, and kind of in terms of the socialization aspect, being mindful of some of those conversations, and how some things may be a little bit different from where
Mhm.
we were this time last year. um,
Yeah.
any other kind of tips that you think can help navigate through some of this, whether right now or as we continue to adjust, hopefully back to something closer to what we were used to? Just
Mhm.
things that can kind of help people with where we are now, and with that transitioning back to a much different way of life than what we've seen the last 5 or 6 months.
Ooh, some tips. How much time you got? No.
I told you, I mean, as much time as you need, really.
We got time. We got nothing but time. No, this Zoom is unlimited. No, one thing is just to um acknowledge how you feel. A lot of people feel like they need to feel a type of way during, when they hear that, hey, our season, is in limbo. Some people, feel like they have to be thinking like everybody else or responding like everybody else, or they're going to be an outcast if they don't, feel like everybody else. And I think a tip or a piece of advice I would offer would be to be strong in your feelings. Like if you feel like, what, I feel safer if we don't have a season. If you feel that way, then you feel that way. If you feel like you have protections in place enough to where you feel comfortable having a season, feel that way. Like, don't let somebody intimidate you into thinking like they do, because it's happening. Like, you see it on social media. As soon as somebody's like, I think this, it's like, an attack. And it's an opinion, it's not like it's a fact. So I would say, feel secure in your feelings about what you're going through right now. But then also not only be insecure in your feelings, but also feel what you feel. Um, some people feel guilty feeling happy, during this time. And some people feel guilty that they don't feel as stressed as somebody else, or they're not as involved in social justice movements as other people. Like some people feel like a little guilt because they're actually in a good space. And if you're in a good space right now, that's okay. Like the goal is for you to be okay. And so don't feel like you have to, put on a front or fake your feelings, to get by. Just make sure that whatever you feel, you feel. And then also, sorry, my nephew's trying to call me. But then I don't know if you can hear my phone. But then
Oh, we
also,
well we've definitely got to wrap this up quickly so you can call him back.
yes, that's my dude. But so that's one thing, just, feeling your feelings and, accepting how you feel and don't feel pressured by anybody else. But then also moving into this fall semester, um, know that it's not going to be like fall 19. It's not going to be as lit. It's not going to be as exciting. It's going to be very different. And the thing about that, now that like kind of went through a crash course in the spring with how classes are going to go, how meetings are going to go, how, your communications are going to go, you have kind of a foundation to build on for this fall. If you know your classes are going to be online, like I said earlier, commit to sticking on a schedule. And if you know that, the people that you love the most are going to be far away from you once you come back to school. Make time to talk with them. And if you feel like, going back to school is super stressful to you, then talk with somebody. Definitely talk with somebody. This is something that you don't have to go through by yourself. Um, you don't have to keep everything bottled up because you don't want to, annoy or inconvenience somebody else. Reach out to, people that you trust. You definitely don't want to put your feelings in somebody else's hands that you don't trust, but reach out to somebody who's going to listen and not just hit you with a, man, that's crazy. Because we do know that it's crazy, but make sure you reach out to somebody that's going to try and help. And then whether that's a position coach that you trust, or a sports psychology person, a mental health counselor, your academic advisor, tutor coordinator, whoever you feel comfortable kind of leaning on, use your resources, lean on your people, because they're prepared. I know a lot of the conversations I've had this summer, a lot of the workshops I did this summer, a lot of your athletic professionals are prepared to some extent to help with all of the uncertainties with this fall semester coming up. So don't feel like you're being an inconvenience to somebody. But at the same time, in the midst of all this craziness, we still got to function, and people still have expectations for us, and we still need to get stuff done. So using your resources to kind of get yourself on track, but then also know that you got to get your schoolwork done. You got to stay eligible. You got to stay on the dean's list. You got to get your work done. And so that means kind of getting all your ducks in a row before school starts. And you're like, look, I know I got to take, a bio lab, and I got to take a chemistry lecture this semester. It's going to be wild, but this is how I'm going to do it. So kind of taking the time to prepare for this semester, a little bit harder than you have in the past, because the semester is going to be different for sure. And then also, I would say just the expectations of what normal is going to be kind of out the window now. So you basically get to create your normal now, because like I said, normal fall 19 is gone. So now we got to create a new normal for fall 20. So that could look like using your tutoring services more. It could look like spending more time with yourself. It's kind of figuring out what you want to do after athletics. That's a deep conversation that we have with people, and it hits them like a tanker. That senior year, and it's just kind of like, wow. And that's a hard conversation to have. So if you do have time to explore who you are outside of athletics, if you're a social justice warrior and you didn't know it, like using your time to help others, you know what I'm saying? So it's kind of using this time to prepare for the semester, but then also preparing yourself, because we got a lot coming down the pipeline, a lot of feelings coming down the pipeline, and a lot of reactions, a lot of responses coming through. So just make sure that you spend time to prepare yourself for, especially for the what ifs, because like right now, nobody knows a lot of people don't know what their season's going to look like. So taking this time to figure out, if this happens, this is what I need to do. If this happens, this is what I need to do. And this is what I need to help get this done. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
When you mentioned the idea of feeling confident in a backup plan, and kind of having different options and contingencies in such an uncertain set of circumstances, I guess talking to coaches at different points throughout this, particularly the high school coaches, there was a sense of not wanting to tell their student athletes that they were anticipating starting on a certain date and then have that, so I mean, metaphorical rug kind of pulled out from under them at the last minute, and worrying about that impact on them and their mood, and just potentially deflating them in a lot of ways, versus now that, again, in terms of high school athletes, the LHSA has this targeted October 8th start date for football, and has these target dates in place for the fall sports. And there's a sense that the timelines right now are admittedly ambitious, but there's an excitement to have a target date finally after so much uncertainty. how
Yeah.
do you how do you kind of weigh, I don't think there's a completely right or wrong answer one way or the other, but how do you weigh
Hmm.
those two sort of competing dynamics where you worry about a kid really banking on that target date and having it pulled away versus having everything be so nebulous and uncertain and not having even that kind of framework? How difficult can either of those be, and what's your thought on how to find some sort of balance in those two sort of rock and hard place situations?
Yeah. Well, with that, yeah, it is a rock and a hard place situation for real though, because it's just like because you want to, it's like you want to have a season, you want to play, you want to compete, you want to come for revenge if somebody, snuck a win against you last semester, like you coming, like that's what you want to do, but at the same time, or maybe that's just me, but it's just like you have like what you want to do. Say you don't want to give all the information and that information backfire in your face, and you have to pick up the pieces on your own. But at the same time, possibly giving all the options. It's like, hey, y'all, look, October 8th is, what we're given, should this happen, should this be our go day, this is what, is what we're playing for, this is what we're going to do. But if that doesn't happen, this is what we also plan on doing. And that's something to where it's just like, because if you keep on promoting that October 8th, and then it doesn't happen, it's like, a build up to a birthday and you don't get what you want. And you're like, oh, thank you. And you go and cry about it later. But you definitely don't want that to happen. But at the same time, just kind of presenting all options, but then also accepting all options. Because you could easily hear, oh, we're doing this or that. But if you really want to go for that October 8th, all you're going to hear is October 8th. So it's one thing to put it out there, but it's also another one to accept and understand and operate under the notion that it could go this way or that way. And I think that happens a lot, to where you hear what you want to, So I think from the coach's perspective, just kind of, laying out your options and, like I said, planning for those as best you can with as fluid a situation as it is. But on the athlete side and even on the staff side, it's just kind of knowing that this could go either way. And so maybe not put all your eggs in that October 8th basket, and accepting that October 8th could happen or it could not happen, and kind of figuring out how you're going to respond either way, because you don't just want to react, because then that could be bad.
You touch upon, I guess, kind of the perspective of the coaches or staffers or whoever the case may be there, and that's something I wanted to ask you about when we talked about sort of the advice for young athletes and how to navigate some of this, and ways to I guess to approach things that can kind of help their own mindset and mentality, and just general attitude, wellness, all of these things. And I wanted to ask you potential advice for the adults in kind of engaging some of these conversations. And you mentioned that coaches and really most professionals that these young athletes are dealing with in a school setting have some level of training and are going into these situations kind of prepared. But whether it be those folks or even parents at home trying to think
Hmm.
of, all right, so what is some aspect that my kid is going through that I should be mindful of? How can I maybe make sure that I'm there to be more supportive in a time that can be a high stress time for them? What would be something that stands out to you about just keeping in mind from that adult or friend or whoever, kind of being there for them?
One thing would be to not generalize the situation. If there's an athlete that comes to you and it's like, man, I really don't know how to handle this season, or, handle whether the season's going to happen or not. And the first thing you say, I know, so is everybody else, or, oh, it's happening all over the country, or, because that belittles their experience. Because you're like, oh, well, it's happening to everybody. Everybody's got to deal with it, so do you. So just make sure that you don't generalize their problem or generalize their issue to, well, everybody in sports don't know what's going on. because that kind of makes it seem like their situation isn't as important as everybody else's. So definitely pay attention to what they're saying, and make it, how can I say this? Not act like it, but pay attention like their situation is unique, I guess would be a good way to say that. Because it is, because how this athlete is explaining their situation with their season in limbo could be totally different from how another athlete explains it. So just make sure you come in with an open mind and not well, yeah, it's happening all over the place. But then also listening. An athlete can tell you so much without saying a whole lot, if that makes sense. Like if you know that athlete and if you kind of understand what they're saying without saying it, listen to them, because they might come and be like, this is wild. And that could mean I'm about to lose it. Or that could mean I'm about to cry. Or that could mean, a whole bunch of other stuff. But if they just come and tell you that, listen, because that simple phrase could open the door to a whole lot of other stuff that's going on. And then also, check yourself, check with yourself, as an adult, whether you're related to an athlete or you're, supporting an athletic department or you're working in an athletic department, like things are happening. And, there have been furloughs, there have been layoffs, there have been complete, programs that have been cut from colleges. And so as a professional, there's a whole bunch of what ifs as well. So make sure you're in a good spot to support these athletes. Take care of yourself. That's one thing that I've been asked, well, you take care of everybody else, who takes care of you? And I'm like, I got that, boo, I got that. But yeah, like as a professional, as a coach, on a coaching staff, have you sat down and it's getting dark. Like, have you sat down and thought about, what's going to happen when you decide, or, when the LHSA decides what's going to happen? Like, have you sat, well, now I look orange, but, so it's like, as a professional or as an adult in an athlete's situation, how are you processing the situation? And have you processed it? And are you in a good space to help them out? Because if you're not, then both are going to be sitting there just mad, and that's not really helping anybody else out. So I would say, as an adult or as a professional in athletics, listen and make sure that you're ready to take on those conversations.
I think a lot of what we talk about kind of references sort of the on-campus relationships with over at UNOU and the staff and coaches, and kind of gives an idea of how much a focal point some of this needs to be with these athletes as we go into the 2020-2021 school and academic year. And obviously the playbook side of that works hand in hand with all of this, and it helps be an additional support service for athletes, whether through school or individually, and other resources. I think honestly we could at some point have another call just talking that much more about what you do with the playbook, but just in terms of providing some of the basic outline or information of the resources you provide there. What would be some of that for young athletes or families or schools that would be interested in learning more about what you do outside of your on-campus role?
Like, just like what mental training is, just like in general, or like what I can help with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Whew, how much time you got? No, I'm kidding. No, mental training and like what I'm certified to do is more about performance, athletic and personal performance. So that's more so, making sure that you are in a good space to compete at a high level, to be academically on point, to be a well-rounded athlete. So that could look like helping you with communication. That could look like helping your team find their identity. If it's, a young team, or, if you're kind of bouncing back from some wild stuff that happened last season, just so more of like a team identity. Mental training can help with, confidence. The coach could be telling you all the time, you're the best player I got on this team, but you're not acting like it. And so that could be, a confidence thing. So we can kind of work through and kind of figure out, what's keeping you from being the athlete that coach sees. And kind of, working with the confidence, the mental toughness, kind of dealing with things like this, kind of giving you a skill set of, mental skills, but also behavioral skills, as far as just like, how do you deal with, nerves before competition? How do you communicate with your coach that, you're going through X, Y, and Z, but you feel like coach may not be listening? So mental training is basically giving you a toolkit, giving you a playbook to pull from as you're going through your season, as you're going through your semester, to where you already know these skills so you can apply them, rather than having to go through a challenge and not know how to react or respond to it. So mental training kind of gives you these skills to use both in athletics, in academics, in your personal life. To kind of help you see a challenge as a challenge and not a hindrance. But it's definitely a service that that's available to everybody. I know when I first started, people assumed that mental training and sports psychology was reserved for professional athletes, or reserved for the best of the best in college, or Olympians. And it's like, yeah, they use sports psychology, but you can too. High schools, city league, travel teams, AAU, college, high school, like everybody can use these skills. And it's actually a really cool skill set to gain as a young athlete, so you can practice them and use them as you get older, and they improve as you use them and as you practice. So if you start using imagery in high school, by the time you're in college, imagery is now like second nature to you. So you're able to use a skill set that other college athletes may not be aware of or know how to use. So yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, just like working any other skill set, any technical aspect of your respective game, just kind of sharpening those tools of how to handle things on the mental side as well.
Mm-hmm. Big facts.
Well, I appreciate it, ma'am. And like I said, I think we should probably link it up again sometime and talk in more detail about some of the opportunities there and different ways that you work with young athletes. But I also know you like it when I eat meals, and so I'm gonna get to dinner here shortly.
Same. I'm about to do the same. I'm like, I am going to go eat, because I haven't done that I haven't eaten a full meal today. So yes, we're on the same page.
Yeah, and you gotta call little man back too.
I do, because he called me twice. And so I'm now in trouble, probably, because I didn't answer.
Well, thanks again for chatting some tonight, despite being zoomed out, taking a break from the coloring book and hopping on to talk about some of this.
No problem. Anytime. For you, anytime. It's all good.
I don't know why you still like me so much, but I'm happy for it. Again, she's Dejanay
All right,
Green.
sir. Have a good one. Eat your food.
You got it. She's Dejanay Green for Louisiana versus all y'all. Jarrett Rosa. We'll be chatting with her again soon.